Good day, everybody. It's 14:01 today, the 6th of July 2021, here in Geneva, Switzerland. My name is David Nabarro, and it's my absolute honour to welcome you to this global dialogue on trade. Trade as an essential piece of the food system's puzzle. Thank you so much for sparing the time to be here. This global dialogue is convened by the World Trade Organization Secretariat in collaboration with the United Nations Food Systems Summit. With us today to open the dialogue are Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the Special Envoy of the United Nations Food Systems Summit, and Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization. The dialogue brings together 130 high-level participants who've been invited from across all corners of the globe and all spectrums of society. And they're here to debate the role of international trade in food systems and in global food security. With us today are members of civil society, are farmers, labour unions, the business community, international organisations and governments from all continents. And the opening and closing plenaries of this dialogue are being live streamed on the World Trade Organization YouTube channel. They're also being live streamed by the United Nations Food Systems Summit. In between the opening and closing plenaries, participants will engage in active discussions in 10 breakout rooms, and the discussions will take place under Chatham House rules. The topics of the breakout rooms are designed to cover the very broad range of ways in which the international trading system interacts with food systems. The topics include international trade in food in times of crisis, international trade and food security, international trade and food safety, and much more. In preparing for September's Food Systems Summit, we've all seen how dialogues have become more and more popular. They bring in different views and perspectives on complex and multifaceted issues. Indeed, multi-stakeholder dialogues are a valuable approach to resolving challenges within systems. Stakeholders connect. They explore options, they consider synergies, they identify choices, and they look at trade-offs. And this is done across different issues and sectors. Dialogues are reflecting consensus and divergence that emerges among participants. They foster connections between food systems and other sectors, and they bring together thematic areas that are essential for making food systems sustainable and equitable, and for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's an absolute privilege, actually, to here be in the position of introducing the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and invite her to give her 4 minutes opening the remarks. It's my honor to give you the floor.
Well, thank you so much, David. And it's so refreshing and nice to see you, David and Agnes. It's been a while since we were all together in different forms. And I want to start by congratulating you and, of course, the Secretary General and the DSG for this, the idea of the Food Systems Summit, throwing light on a very important area Both of you have been engaged in this for a long time, in nutrition for David and you, Agnes, through your work on agriculture. So good day to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. In this packed year on the global policy calendar, I think this Food Systems Summit of the UN is one of the most important events. And there is no doubt that we need food systems that can deliver more food, nutritious food, affordable food, and that can allow us to produce our food in a sustainable manner. I'm very happy and proud that the WTO Secretariat has organized a global dialogue with you in collaboration with you for this Food Systems Summit. And I want to use this opportunity to thank all our staff, the whole team who has been engaged in doing this. I think your exchanges today should shed light on the vital role international trade will play in building the food systems we need in the 21st century. Trade in food is not a luxury. The movement of food from the parts of the world that have a food surplus to those parts that have a food deficit is absolutely critical for global food security. Conservative estimates suggest that 1 in every 6 people around the world depends almost entirely on international trade for the food they eat. About 30 countries rely on imports for nearly all their food. And when you listen to some of the food import-dependent countries talk, Japan, for instance, was talking about this the other day in another context. You realize just how important trade is to ensuring that people on the planet are fed. Trade also enhances nutrition by expanding variety and allowing us to eat more fruits and vegetables throughout the year, with substantial improvement in the balance of our diets. And looking ahead, trade will be key to eliminating hunger and malnutrition, the SDG 2, especially as our changing climate disrupts rainfall patterns and crop production. International trade is also important for global food security because it lifts people out of poverty, as it did for over 1 billion people in the 30 years prior to this pandemic. Trade creates jobs and raises incomes, allowing people to access the food and nutrition they need. In his writings on famine, Nobel laureate Amartya Sen famously observed that widespread starvation is often not the result of an insufficient supply of food. It is the result of people not having sufficient incomes to purchase enough of it. Trade in food and agricultural products continues to be impeded by trade distorting agricultural subsidies, as well as high tariff barriers. For example, the average agricultural tariff is nearly double the average tariff on industrial goods. Trade barriers and distortions also reduce the predictability of international agricultural markets, complicating planting and purchasing decisions, and often disincentivizing longer-term investments to increase productivity. Related sectors face comparable distortions. Environmentally harmful fisheries subsidies and fossil fuel subsidies are just 2 of the policy areas where political leadership and serious policy reform is needed to make food systems fit for purpose. These examples point to an underlying issue about natural resources and food systems. Trade in food is also trade in land, water, and energy. As the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, tells us, were countries such as Egypt to aim for food self-sufficiency, it would need 3 river Niles, not 1. Globally, agriculture uses about 40% of the global land area and about 70% of the world's total fresh water, mostly for irrigation. Our reliance on international trade for global food security is only likely to grow. According to the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, if you push the clock forward to the year 2050, around 50% of humanity may depend on international trade to be fed. This is because of population growth and our changing climate. It will also become necessary to dramatically enhance agricultural productivity and to make changes to the human and animal diet. In this global dialogue on trade and the 10 breakout sessions that will follow, WTO members, farmers, businesses, civil society, international organizations, and academics alike will grapple with these issues. I look forward to hearing about these brainstormings and the ideas they generate, and will hope that they will contribute to taking WTO agricultural negotiations forward. These negotiations are, of course, in a tricky place and a sticky place right now. There's still a long way to go in leveling the playing field in agricultural trade and in reducing the many different barriers that make it harder for food to travel. So let us hope that what we embarked on today with you and in the Food System Summit to come will help us ease the playing field for food around the world. Thank you.
On behalf of everybody here, Dr. Ngozi, I'd love to thank you for that extraordinary and clear statement of the power of trade, but also, because it's powerful, of the challenges. And so I'd like to actually just raise one more point with you that you didn't cover, which is the following. This global dialogue on trade is coming right in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. I think you know, Ngozi, that I've been working with Dr. Tedros in the World Health Organization on COVID-19. And I'd be really interested to know, how has COVID-19 impacted on trade in food?
Well, thank you, David. That's a very good question. Because initially when the pandemic struck, there was some panic. As you know, supply chains were disrupted for many products, but also for food. There were many members put on import restrictions and prohibitions with the fear that the pandemic would have a deleterious effect on food. So when policymakers are in that situation, they often put these export bans or prohibitions or restrictions. So that's what we saw. I think this in some products, for example, especially rice, where global markets are a bit thin, we saw some real impact on this, because the bulk of rice is consumed domestically and the international market is a little bit thin. So this had a particular effect. And actually, before I came, I'm told that several ministers from parts of the world that are particularly food independent did make their way to Geneva to talk to the WTO about this issue and what should be done to make sure that food is not impacted. I'm happy to tell you that after the first set of measures that were put in to restrict the export of food, I think countries talked themselves through it and saw that it would be better not to have this happen. Otherwise, inflationary tendencies would set in those places where food is not so available. And I think a number of members then eased these export restrictions and bans on food, and food began to flow. And I think one of the good things, when you contrast this to the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, the pandemic has not resulted in the kind of stress on food exports and that we saw earlier in this crisis. So it has eased. Trade has played a good role in making sure food gets from one part of the world to another where it's needed. It's not perfect, but I think it's been more part of the solution rather than a problem.
I think that's an extraordinary account, actually, of really successful intermediation by WTO. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Ngozi. And I think it's very significant that it was possible to reduce the inflationary pressures in the way you describe. Thank you again. I'd now like to go to our other co-convener, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Kalibata is Special Envoy for the United Nations Food Systems Summit, and it is an absolute privilege for me to be working with her in supporting the summit dialogues. Dr. Kalibata, you have the floor for your introductory remarks now.
Good. Thank you, David, and thank you for the extraordinary work you're doing supporting the summit. I'm really privileged, Dr. Ngozi, to be on this stage with you. I consider you my mentor, and really thank you for the work you've done, believing in women and girls. And also, right now, thank you for recognizing that there's a long way to go to straightening agricultural trade. These are the challenges that we live with, and I really appreciate you recognizing that. We have entered the Food Systems Summit mostly for a number of reasons, but the most important part of really launching the Food Systems Summit is recognizing that we are not coming through on SDGs, which is a core part of what we have signed up to, and that we see raising levels of inequalities in our midst. We see climate change and degradation of ecosystems within our food systems. We see increasing numbers of people suffering from hunger, malnutrition, and obesity. And we also see, and this is becoming an interesting area, we also see that food systems is costing us so much in terms of hidden cost to health and to environment. And this has only been made worse by COVID-19, as Dr. Ngozi has just said, and really strengthening the call for a transition to more sustainable food systems. Food systems that can help us achieve a better balance between our economics, our society, and environmental objectives. Trade is an integral part of food systems and is an important enabler of food systems transformation, as Dr. Ngozi has said. It connects people in all stages of food value chains, linking producers and consumers. Trade is a critical part of food security, diets, and affordability of nutrition. Giving you an example, here in Africa, 80% of the food that we produce is eaten away from the farms where it is produced. This would not be possible without trade. But trade has also been associated with negative externalities that can undermine the achievement of sustainable objectives, especially when producers are not able to compete with cheap imports, or when trade outcomes disincentivize players from investing in greener food systems. To mitigate these risks and harness the full benefit of trade, it's important to ensure coherent and aligned policies across a number of areas related to trade, agriculture, environment, health, and education. The process towards the Food Systems Summit has elevated 3 key areas that I want to call out. To minimize the potential for trade to contribute positively to food systems transformation. These 3 areas include reducing disruption to trade, unlocking the potential of trade, and reorienting agri-food systems. In reducing the disruption to global trade, we recognize that data is extremely important, and ensuring that global food markets are transparent, and ensuring that this transparency can be extended to other areas, including agricultural input markets, commodities, and global food logistics and choke points would hugely enhance trade and trade transparency. Unlocking the potential of trade. Our dialogues have called out for smooth flows of trade and efficient cross-border procedures that are essential to ensuring trade contributes effectively to food systems objectives. Streamlining sanitary and phytosanitary measures has significant potential and has also been called out. Enhancing adoption of trade facilitation measures, including use of digital solutions in exchange of trade documents, certification, and all that. Probably the most important area has been, or the most called out area has been a reorientation of policies to target food systems productivity, resilience, and sustainability. Existing agri-food system policies shape food systems by providing incentives or disincentives to producers and processors. There's so much discussion on the role of agricultural subsidies. Further discussions are needed in, for example, how to target income support to farm households most in need, encourage the orientation of public expenditure towards investments in public good, and how to address challenges related to biodiversity loss, deforestation, and better producer livelihoods. We come to this with a huge trust that World Trade Organization is the appropriate forum for these discussions. In conclusion, trade is complex and so are food systems. The Food Systems Summit process has been precisely about supporting governments to lead whole of government and society dialogues around the wide range of challenges and opportunities that all groups perceive. Ideally, this can help be the foundation for better partnership, better discussions, better trust, ensuring that all groups of people, indigenous peoples, private sector, civil society, member states, all come around the table to have conversations that can move us forward. I hope that this dialogue takes us a step further to those. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and I look forward to these conversations.
Well, I thought that was absolutely fabulous. Most grateful to you for all that you were able to pack into your 4 minutes. You know, I'm really interested, Dr. Kalibata, in the way in which you've used dialogue as the principal means for engaging stakeholders all over the world in thinking through the issues in food systems. And there's, I believe, quite a lot of interest in trade. Often it's quite heatedly debated. I wonder if you would like to say anything else about what's emerging from the dialogues in relation to trade.
So thank you, David. First of all, it's amazing to see that we have over 138 countries now doing the dialogues. This is something that we had planned for about 100 by the time of the pre-summit. To see 138 countries and 42 of those are in Africa is something that makes us really, really excited. Trade keeps coming up in these dialogues for a number of reasons. People have experienced higher food prices, especially of recent. And people get worried about, should they be worrying about shorter value chains? Should it be longer value chains? How does this impact environmental outcomes? So those conversations will continue. And it's really important to ensure that we provide space for those conversations to happen. Agriculture is an important and critical part of trade and will always be. It touches people's lives in the form of food, but also in forms of poverty reduction and also and livelihood improvement. And this was called out by Dr. Ngozi earlier. So I think here the most critical part is to look at the equity part of trade and how trade can help us facilitate equity and access to the bare minimums of life, which is food, and how then that influences the quality of life. So the opportunities are here for us to discuss today, and that's why really we are having these conversations, that we don't lock ourselves out, that we recognize that agriculture is difficult, food systems are difficult, but the opportunities are in our midst. That's why we're having these discussions.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for setting that out so clearly. Thank you also for really putting trade right at the heart of our discussions. And to both Dr. Ngozi and Dr. Kalibata, I really would like to thank you both for really excellent opening remarks, which will set the scene for what now happens in the breakout discussion rooms. There are 10 of them. Participants will be automatically sent to the breakout rooms. That's why we asked you to make sure that you've got the right naming, and that's brilliant. The discussions in the breakout rooms are non-attributable. They take place under Chatham House rules. To those of you who've joined us on the WTO YouTube channel, you are so welcome. So too are those of you on the UN Food System Summit live stream. Please return within just under 1 hour for the closing plenary of this dialogue. This will be live streamed just as we're doing this one. Breakout rooms will be given 10 minutes of ice-breaking time to allow them to run a round of introductions, to be followed by about 55 minutes of deliberations. Organisers will be sending a pop-up message to all rooms 5 minutes before the closing plenary to warn them of their impending shutdown and ask them to wrap up. And the shutdown is quite sudden on this software. So participants will automatically be directed to the closing plenary afterwards. Well, everybody, this is one of the most exciting moments. It's when the discussion groups start. I'd like to wish all participants the very best in their deliberations. I look forward to meeting you again at around 15:25 to 15:30. I'll come and see you in your breakout rooms. The distribution starts now.